Mission accomplished? Did you watch it? Well, we did. The night didn't start off so hot when Biden made this gaffe with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. Take a listen.
President Putin. President Putin. You can beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
You are a hell of a lot better.
Zelensky there said, I'm better. Biden joking about it, trying to clarify things and convince everybody that he's fine. You know, Putin and Zelensky are on opposite sides of the war in Ukraine, of course. Fast forwarding to tonight when he held that news conference, a rare one. The last one he had was back in November. That started, by the way, an hour later than anticipated. He was supposed to speak at 6:30. He started about 7:27. He spoke about an hour once he did, and the question about that misspeak came up.
Officials here are saying off the record that your decline has become noticeable. Hasn't this now, frankly, become damaging for America's standing in the world? Thank you.
Did you see any damage to our standing by leading this conference? Have you seen a more successful conference? What do you think? And the Putin piece, I was talking about Putin, and I said, and now, at the very end, I said, here, I mean, Putin, I said, no, I'm sorry, Zelensky. And then I added 5 other names.
You put a camera on anybody 24/7, you're going to make mistakes. An interesting take here as everybody, the entire world watches his every word. Biden went on to say the conference was successful and said other leaders were thanking him for this summit. And he did speak clearly about several foreign policy issues, including Israel, and trying to pass along the lessons he says he learned after 9/11.
When I went to Israel immediately after the massacres that occurred at the hands of Hamas, the one thing I said to the Israelis, and I met with the War Cabinet and with Bibi, don't make the same mistake America made after bin Laden. There's no need to occupy anywhere. Go after the people who did the job. You may recall I still get criticized for it, but I was totally opposed to the occupation and trying to unite Afghanistan. Once we got bin Laden, we should have moved on.
Now, most of the news conference was held with that tone, that mood. He was sturdy, he was competent, he was calm, and he was articulate for the most part, but he also had a few issues, including this gaffe, which has many of you talking on social media. He was asked about Congress and celebrities, saying he should step aside and how that weighs into his decision to stay put, and what concerns he has about his vice president's ability to take on Trump.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president. So let's start there. Number one, the fact is that the consideration is that I think I'm the most qualified person to run for president. I beat him once, and I will beat him again.
Now, clearly, he was talking about Vice President Harris, not Vice President Trump, when he spoke. This news conference came the same day as the first congresswoman from our state, a Democrat of West Michigan, called on Biden to step aside. Now, that West Michigan Democrat says that people can't unsee Biden's debate performance. That was 2 weeks ago. And a majority of you agree with that congresswoman. 57% say President Biden should drop out, with 9% saying he should wait until next month to decide. This poll that I put up on X this morning has been getting a lot of action, and a lot of people are now waiting to hear that news conference that happened earlier tonight. And now that they heard that, we want to know what you think as well. We have a lot to unpack tonight, and we have just the guy to do it. Oakland University political science professor Dave Dulio is with us here tonight. We thank him for staying up late with us here tonight. And this has been such an interesting one. You were with us at 6 o'clock this evening, and now you're joining us tonight. You watched that news conference, and let's take a look at this, as Dave, you always do, to zap the politics of your own preference out of this and look objectively at this man. For the majority of the hour, he spoke with fluency when it comes to foreign policy. Did you observe the same thing?
I did. I actually think President Biden is at his best when he talks about foreign policy. I think his time in the Senate, he mentioned it during the press conference, that he was chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for many, many years, right? And he's touted his relationships with world leaders since he really started running for president 4 years ago. And I think that really comes through when he speaks, even contemporaneously like he did today, and he's really solid on that. But as you mentioned in your open, right, there were some fumbles, there were some gaffes, there were some mistakes, and I think that is unfortunately for him, what people are going to remember, right? The mistaking Trump for Harris, that's what's going to get all the play on social media tomorrow and into the weekend.
Now, his contender, his direct competition, Donald Trump, has had a series of gaffes as well in the course of many, many months. I think Biden in this case said, look, as I did 20 campaign events since the debate, what has Trump been doing? This is a question of both men's fragility and their power. When you looked at him here tonight, do you think people will look past those mistakes and say, you know what, that debate was indeed just a bad night?
I don't. I think that it's very difficult, as you mentioned in your open again, right? It's hard for people to unsee what they saw 2 weeks ago. And even his interview with George Stephanopoulos from not that long ago, a few days ago, there were some similar concerns, right? I think his press conference was better than the debate, but I don't think it's going to put those questions of his ability to finish the campaign and, frankly, lead the country for another 4 years. It's not putting those to bed.
So let's talk about the walls that are closing in on all circles. We have Hollywood. You have George Clooney. Some people who are conspiracy theorists say that Barack Obama encouraged George Clooney to close in and print that op-ed, essentially asking him to step aside. Other congressional leaders, in public, they're saying we support him, but we're understanding in private there are some deep concerns. How much do those concerns play into a part of what he decides to do here?
If it's congressional, say members of the House, members of the Senate, you showed Congresswoman Skolton there from around the Grand Rapids area coming out today and saying he should step aside. I don't think those matter at all for Joe Biden. I think that it's his close confidants, it's his family, it's his advisors and loyal and trusted confidants that he's had for decades that are really going to be the ones who influence him, if at all, right? He seemed incredibly dug in and incredibly committed to seeing this campaign through.
If something was to happen where all of a sudden he started losing that mojo and we notice the debate guy coming back, if you will, and they decide, the Democratic Party, that we have to move forward with somebody else, what does that look like when it comes to delegates and donors and, let's say, VP Harris?
I think she is the only option at this point. I mean, practically speaking, the Biden campaign could transfer the money the president mentioned in his news conference. They've got $220-some million in the bank, right? That's a sizable amount of change that somebody else would have to go and raise. He could transfer that to a Harris for President campaign committee, and they would be able to hit the ground running. I also think that it'll be very difficult for Democrats to pass over the sitting vice president of the United States for somebody else, be it Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, or, find somebody else in the Democratic Party. I think passing over the sitting vice president is crazy talk.
Even if she's not popular, relatively speaking?
Absolutely. I mean, if he were not president, it would be her, right? Sure. And that's almost the line of succession, right? We often see vice presidents run either for like a third term of the if the president served 2 terms, they follow up with that. They rarely win, but they are the next in line.
Who does it help or hurt if they do a shakeup and they put someone else instead of Biden? Does it help the Democrats? Does it help Trump?
It depends. I think that it depends who that other candidate would be. I think there are some Democrats out there, Gretchen Whitmer being one, frankly, who could put up a pretty good fight against Donald Trump. She's got some work to do. She would have some work to do nationwide and especially in the battleground states to make sure people knew who she was and build that name recognition. But, she's positioned herself
in a pretty good place.
Pretty well, certainly compared to somebody like Gavin Newsom.
Last question. Give Biden a grade today in terms of his performance. What would you give him?
B-.
Which is better than the debate.
It is, but not, it wasn't that home run that I think he needed to just snuff out all the questions.
Well, Dave Dooley, always good to see you. Thanks for joining us here tonight on our show. We appreciate you staying up with us. We are keeping the conversation about President Biden's speech going after the break. Next, a former Democratic Congresswoman who spent some time with the president and a lot of time in Washington, and a conservative consultant here at home. They're in the hot seat. But before we go to break, more of your thoughts on Biden. Travis Bickle says the onus has shifted from what should Biden do. He's apparently swimming upstream, and the current becomes stiffer by the minute.